Over the past 8 weeks, our 3D artist Skylar has rebuilt every character in Grovekeeper. She's redesigned 2 entire armies, replaced the most important tree in the game, and you can play the new build containing all this work right now. Grovekeeper is a real-time strategy game where you play as a living forest, defending your grove from loggers, poachers and warriors, in a dark medieval fantasy world. About a year and a half ago I uploaded a devlog called Making Monsters, in which I overhauled every character model in the game, and at the time I thought I had nailed it. I'm a decent 3D artist, I know my way around a polygon, but it has never been my greatest strength. And since receiving funding at the beginning of 2026, almost every part of Grovekeeper has improved. The environments are more detailed, the lighting is stronger, the gameplay is more polished, and my supposedly new and improved character models have started to look increasingly out of place. Thankfully, our incredible 3D artist and collaborator Skylar was willing to do the whole thing again. Every human, every guardian, the home tree, all rebuilt from the ground up. So let's take a look at Grovekeeper's even newer and considerably more improved models. So this is the Satier. The Satier is a wine-loving, hedonistic forest sprite from Greek mythology. In Grovekeeper, the Satier is your most basic infantry unit, an affordable, dependable all-rounder who is reasonably effective in almost any situation. This is the earliest version of the Satier, created back in 2022. The polygon count is unbelievably high. The normals are flipped on one of his horns, and he doesn't even have fingers, just these fleshy mittens attached to the ends of his arms. This model served me well during the early days of development, but it's pretty shocking to look back on now. A year or so later, I updated the model and leaned further into the horse-legged appearance. This was certainly an improvement, but it still wasn't ideal. There are strange holes in the mesh, the weight painting is completely wrong in places, and the proportions are a little unusual. But we were getting closer to something solid. Fast forward to February 2025, and I updated the Satier once again. This time I actually did the responsible thing and I created some concept art first. I sketched out the characters and produced a series of renders so that every model would follow the same general visual language. By this point, my modeling and texturing had improved dramatically. But if we peel back the surface and look at the geometry, there are still problems. The model isn't properly optimized, the edge loops are awkward. Visually it was getting closer to what I wanted, but technically it was still being held together by hope. Rather than simply handing Skylar the old models and asking her to make them better, we first needed to establish what the world of Grovekeeper was actually supposed to look like. We used undisclosed project management software to communicate our ideas, and I created a style guide to help us get on the same page. The guide wasn't simply a collection of attractive reference images, it established a set of rules that every new asset needed to follow. This is a real-time strategy game. We needed to be able to place a large number of characters on screen simultaneously without causing the average computer to burst into flames. We therefore gave Skylar a strict polygon budget, generally targeting around 3,000 to 4,000 polygons per model, with 5,000 as the absolute upper limit. For Skylar, that proved to be a substantial change from the kind of modeling she had previously been doing. This is what she had to say.
Most of the character models that I had created before this job were anime-style models for VR chat and tubing. Most of these models had a poly count of 40,000 to 80,000. For this project, I was asked to work with a poly count of no more than 5,000 polys, with 3,000 to 4,000 being the target due to them needing to have a large number of units on screen at any one time.
Every polygon has to justify its existence. So this is Skylar's Satier. Skylar needed to decide which shapes were essential to the character's silhouette, which details could be represented through textures and normal maps, and which details would never be visible from the gameplay camera anyway. The anatomy was stronger, the proportions are more deliberate, and the topology is considerably cleaner. And he also has fingers. One of the major improvements in this edition was the cosmetic variations. All the units can now spawn with different hairstyles, piercings, smaller visual details. We also apply a random hue shift to the material, giving each unit a little variation. When several are summoned together, they now look like a group of individual creatures, rather than one creature being repeatedly duplicated by the forest. And this is what the finished Satier looks like in the game. So here's the progress of the other Guardians, from the earliest versions to what they look like today. The Orcus needed to feel enormous, heavy, difficult to kill, like a tank. Its proportions needed to communicate mass, broad shapes, heavy limbs, a low center of gravity, and they all help sell the idea that this creature is going to be difficult to move once it reaches the battlefield. The Skessa needed to communicate something completely different. She is fast, vicious, extremely dangerous, but also alarmingly fragile. Her proportions are narrower and more skeletal. The silhouette feels quick and predatory rather than strong or heavily armored. The Goblins are weak individually, but become dangerous in groups. They needed enough personality to feel like individual creatures, while still looking as though they naturally belong together as a pack. The Leshy needed to look like something ancient and powerful enough that the humans would regret entering the forest. Rather than giving Skylar completely new designs, I provided her with the concepts and models I had already created. She then interpreted those designs through her own style, improving anatomy, topology, proportions, and smaller details, while preserving the identity and gameplay role of each unit. That balance is one of the things that makes a good collaborator so valuable. She understood what each design was trying to achieve and found ways to push it further. Something worth mentioning is that Skylar has aphantasia, the inability to voluntarily create mental images in your mind's eye. And that might sound like a fairly considerable obstacle for a visual artist, but for Skylar, it also shaped the way she approaches her work.
I have a condition called aphantasia, which basically means I can't visualize things in my mind. It's both a curse and a blessing. I tend to see the world in a very analytical and stylized way, and I'm able to break objects down into their basic shapes.
Many people with aphantasia are convinced that they can't become artists, but Skylar is determined to show others that you can in fact overcome these challenges and create beautiful work. Between Skylar's aphantasia and me being a colorblind art director, it's frankly a miracle that Grovekeeper looks like anything at all. But the Guardians were only half the job. Skylar also had to rebuild the entire human army. The humans presented a slightly different challenge. The Guardians are strange creatures drawn from different mythologies, so they're allowed to look wildly different from one another. The humans, however, needed to feel like members of the same invading society. They needed consistent materials, clothing, and construction techniques. Their equipment needed to look as though it had been produced within the same world, using the same limited tools and resources, but we didn't want them to look like exaggerated fantasy villains. Most of them are laborers, hunters, and soldiers, using equipment that could plausibly exist during the medieval period. Their clothing needed to feel practical, their tools needed to appear functional, their armor needed to show wear and tear. At the same time, every class still needed to be immediately recognizable during gameplay. The woodcutters needed strong tools, broad working silhouettes, and clothing that made them feel like laborers. The hunters needed lighter equipment, leaner silhouettes, and clearly readable ranged weapons. And the warriors needed to become progressively more armored and imposing as the player encountered stronger versions of the class. Skylar also created cosmetic variations for the humans, including different hairstyles and equipment, combined with subtle color variations in the materials. This meant that the attacking force now looks more like a collection of individual people and less like one deeply unfortunate man who's been cloned 20 times. But creating the models was only the first half of the process. A finished model is not necessarily a finished game asset. Every character then needed to be rigged, connected to the existing animation, assigned its materials. We used a texture atlas for all the different humans. They need to be added to the ragdoll system and tested with all of the attacks, powers, and physics interactions. Skylar helped turn a collection of individual designs into a coherent cast. Every character now follows the same artistic rules, fits within the same technical limitations, and feels like it belongs in the same world. But attractive models are only useful if they work when they are thrown into an actual strategy game, and that's the part we cannot properly test by ourselves. The latest Grovekeeper playtest build contains the complete new cast, the redesigned home tree, and all of the gameplay improvements we have made alongside them. We need players to help us test whether the characters remain readable during large battles, whether the cosmetic variations feel natural, and whether the new models perform properly across different computers. Most importantly, we need to know whether the game is fun. So you can play the new build right now through Steam. The playtest is currently private, but getting access is simple. Join the Grovekeeper Discord using the link below and head to the playtest channel and ask us for a Steam key. From there, we've got a feedback form that's integrated into the game where you can share your thoughts with us. So thanks so much for watching, everyone. Grovekeeper is ticking along nicely, and we're getting ready for a public demo released on itch.io at the beginning of November, so stay tuned for that. I'm so proud of this weird little forest defense game, but I'm so deep in development, so good at playing the game. I don't know if it's too difficult or not, or even if the game is playable and entertaining, so please help us out. Thank you. See you in the next one.